Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters of the Week video. In this case though, it's a special edition when it comes to the Cryptid of the Week because it has to do with a suggestion from one of my fellow crypties there on my Patreon channel. So those of you that know my Patreon channel, you know I've created it here for the past almost year or so, and in it I have some fellow members that I'll call crypties. Well, one of these fellow members, this cryptid, goes by the name of Robtilian-Horror, and he has suggested an entry that I have not heard of before that I told him that I would go ahead and talk about it here. Not only that, but what makes this a special edition is the fact that he has also given a commissioned drawing associated with this cryptid. So how neat is that? In this case, an original drawing that I get to share with everyone here. So thank you so much, Mr. Reptilian-Horror, for your continued support and for your entry, and then also the commission drawing that I'll showcase here a little bit later. So very fascinating monster in this case, one that has haunted a particular location there in Illinois for several decades. You know how much I love whenever there's a specific spot, and it has to do with this. It's known as the Tuttle Bottoms Monster. So let's go ahead and let's talk about all the information associated with this legendary creature. So what is this Tuttle Bottoms monster? Well, it's a monster that's found somewhere there in Harrisburg, Illinois, to be specific. And it's been there for a good while, probably about another set of decades. In fact, the earliest known encounter seems to be about the early 60s or so. So you're talking about 50 years as far as this creature being around. Of course, there's always a notion that it could be around for even much longer. It's just the first instance that it was found. And if you wanted to get even more specific on where to find it, it's located there in Harrisburg, Illinois, specifically at a spot called the Saline River Watershed. But then also another encounter that I'll talk about here in a minute, it's also been found apparently on the road called Tuttle Bottoms Road. I think that's where it gets the name from, essentially. Tuttle Bottoms Monster being from that road. I tried to see if there was any other spot named Tuttle Bottoms specifically, but no, nothing else stood out. So for all intents and purposes, it seems like that's the name where it came from that road itself. So any of you there in that Illinois area, anything along those lines, maybe you happen to have family there, or maybe you go by there anytime in the future there at Harrisburg, Illinois, take a chance, go by those locations, the Saline River Watershed, and then also the Tuttle's Bottoms Road, and who knows, you might have a chance of running into this cryptid. So here's how it looks like. Let's first talk about the descriptions. Basically, if you were to take a larger than life anteater, in this case larger than usual, described it as being around 8 feet long, maybe about 4 feet high or sort, and the telltale distinctive nose of an anteater, but then you were to mash it or mix it together with almost ape-like characteristics, like an ape-like body, maybe ape-like forearms, ape-like hair as well. And then you have, in essence, the Tuttle Bottoms monster. That's what it is. It's been described as being bipedal, and then in other cases being more along the lines of using or going on all its 4 feet or its 4 legs. So in some instances it also seems to rise as well on its hind legs, and that's why it walks around in a bipedal stance. But that's what this creature is, just a larger than usual anteater with an anteater like snout, but it has a larger upper body, almost like an ape, and a much hairier body too. It's also been described as having these beady eyes. In fact, one encounter seems to be that these eyes were almost reddish, and that it had a very distinct look to them as it was inspecting the people that it came across. More on that here in a minute. But again, the first known instance seems to be around August 6, 1963, and it has to do with a sheriff that came across somebody that saw this creature. So all in total, throughout the several decades, it's been about 50 reports cited over those decades. So a good number of reports, again, considering the locality of this area. But the first one here on August 6th was later reported by the Harrisburg Daily Register, and here's what they stated. They stated that a sheriff by the name of James L. Thompson, who seemed to be doing the night shift at that time, came across, in this case, a young boy or somebody, a teenage boy, there at around 11 p.m., somewhere around that area there at Tuttle Bottoms. And this young man was armed with a rifle, When he was asked why, he told the sheriff that there was a monster loose there in that area. He described it as being 8 feet long, 4 feet high, same nose like an anteater, and that it was there, and it came across him, and then also a group of a dozen boys by that location. By the way, that area there, that Tuttle Bottoms area, it seemed to be a location. Who knows if it still is now? But back then, it was a location for youth to get together and basically make out. It was one of those lovers' lanes, if you could call it that, and that's why they were all at that the same location, and they all came across this monster. Well, the sheriff, kind of sensing that this was going to be a dangerous spot, he didn't want to have these young boys who were all agitated and who were all, were excited at the same time to be coming across late at night with rifles in a precarious situation. So he decided to disperse them, but he still decided to do some investigation on his own. It didn't seem like he came across this monster afterward, but the Harrisburg Daily Register stated that his investigation ended somewhere around 4:30 a.m. But again, he didn't come across it there. But ever since that time period, again, 50 reports have totaled over those decades. And one other encounter that stood out was this. In fact, there was another location, instance in this case, where it was more of these youths that were hanging around that area, and there they were in their cars making out when they saw this creature rear up towards them. In fact, the way it was described was it was something that lumbered into their view on all fours, and it had this beady eyes as it inspected their cars. These young people there at the time were too stunned to react, but they were clearly observing. All of them were seeing this creature in all of its glory. So this creature basically lost interest in them afterward, which kind of denotes one thing too. All these encounters, and this creature does not seem to do anything dangerous. So whatever this Tuttle Bottoms monster is, it's not something that's going to be hazardous to people. If anything, it's just simply wandering around that area and happens to come across people, and then afterward it just goes back and retreats into the woods. In fact, that's what it did right there. Once it lost interest, it went back into the woods without doing anything else afterward. And those were, again, another group of teenagers that saw this creature. Another instance that stood out, though, was this. There could be a chance that this Tuttle Bottoms monster may, in fact, have a secondary form, and it has to do with this. One man recalls that as he was driving with his babysitter towards, I don't know if it was his home or her home, either way though, they took that Tuttle Bottoms road that I was mentioning earlier. Apparently it's a narrow 2-lane road, and there they were traveling it in the dead of night, presumably after the babysitter had finished his or her job. So as they crossed a bridge, they noticed what they described as this massive bat-winged creature, almost like a pterodactyl of sorts, dive straight towards them. And not only that, it began scratching and pecking at the roof of their car. Isn't that crazy? Here you have an instance where all of a sudden, out of the blue, something like out of a Stephen King novel suddenly is attacking the roof of their car. Of course, they were all screaming at that point, and they decided to floor it. And it was at such a speed that they left whatever this creature was behind it. But it all happened right there at the Tuttle Bottoms Drive road, essentially. So, could this be another form of this Tuttle Bottoms monster? Is definitely something to consider, but the fact that all the other encounters seem to be more in the lines of a peaceful monster, something where it doesn't really do anything to anybody as long as, I guess, it's not provoked, then you have at least one circumstance, but that's it. Nothing else really tied to it thereafter. As far as speculation of what this thing is, to this day, because of its being so elusive and having such a great way of concealing itself, no one really knows much about it, only a speculation at this point. In fact, there's a resident there named Virgil Smith who also told that newspaper there, the Harrisburg Daily Register, that he believes the creature is somebody or something that was released by the federal government, something that was just who knows, experimented on, and then finally afterward just discarded by their area, and then that's why it's a one of a kind thing. I don't know, that kind of seems more along the lines straight out of a science fiction novel than anything else, but that's just one explanation. And then this person, this Virgil Smith, also claims that the U.S. Department of Agriculture had indeed launched a private investigation to try to find out the existence or the whereabouts of this Tuttle Bottoms monster. But no further proof seems to be found of this thing as far as its location or where it is, where it came from, even any kind of photographic evidence, nothing along those lines. All that's left to this very day is just the usual eyewitness reports from some very scared people, clearly, running across this thing, and then that's it. Nothing else more concrete along those lines. But what do you guys think as far as this creature, the Tuttle Bottoms monster? Again, you have to go there to Harrisburg, Illinois, and if you go by that Tuttle Bottoms Road, or if you happen to go by the Saline River watershed, then you have a good chance, hopefully, of running into this creature. Anybody by that area that can provide more information I might have missed? Maybe something else from a family member, relative, somebody, coworker that happens to be a lifelong person that knows more info? Please post those comments below. And again, thank you so much, as always, to Mr. Robtilian-Horror for your suggestion, and then also for your entry there. You've seen by now, in fact, that that's the photo that I'm gonna show it one more time here. That's the commissioned drawing that was associated with this creature. Really cool stuff when you think about it. So, all right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care.